morning, everyone. Welcome to live lecture session of Swayam Prabha channel. I am RIYA PRAMANIK. So, we are going to start the course of BPSC 143, that is the state politics in India. In this block, we will be learning about the introduction. And here in today's lecture, we will be talking about two units, that is Unit 1, Development of State Politics in India, and Unit 2, that is Frameworks for Analysis. So let's begin with Unit 1, that is Development of State Politics in India. To know why we are learning this chapter and why it is important to know about the state politics in India, we will be here uh, understanding the importance of this course. So, the state politics in India subject discusses how the patterns of state politics have changed in India since the 1950s. As we all know that India got independence in the year 1947, and after that we have started the regular elections since then, and from there onwards, the state politics become very important. So, this course will focus on changes in the status of states, that is, in the regional and national politics, how states are playing a very important role in the regional politics as well as in the national politics. Similarly, the leadership patterns, how the leadership patterns evolved over time in these states and how it is impacting the national politics. Along with that, we will be learning about the political parties and political processes which took place over these years. So, state politics as a specialized field of politics in India developed in the post independence period. Because before that, before independence, we were ruled by the British government, and it is only after the independence we have achieved. We started focusing on our politics, and from there onwards, the state politics become a very important part. So, the state politics in India was in the 1960s that political scientists felt that there is a need to study state politics as a specialized subject. Moving forward, now we will be learning about how the state politics took place or shaped in the decades of 1950s and 1960s. So this is a very important stage where we can see that after independence there were many changes that India was facing at that time. And so here we will be learning about what changes and what happened in this period which shaped the politics. So, state politics in the first two decades after the independence grew under the influence of center. Because India got independence in the year 1947 and everything was very new for India, so the state politics at that point of time was influenced by the center, which was very powerful back then. So it is even today very powerful, but back then it was highly influenced by the center. So the focus was on the pursuit of the nation state building in India. The focus of the leadership or the leaders at that point of time was to on the pursuit of the nation state building. So at in this decades, it was Nehruvian model which was followed. So Nehruvian model of development was followed at that point of time, which talks about democracy, socialism, and mixed economy. Along with that, there was a single party dominance of the Congress. So, because Congress is supposed like after independence or even before independence, Congress played a very important role in India getting independence. So, it is the Congress which was very dominant in these two decades, and there were many less parties. There were very less parties who can oppose Congress at that point of time. So, state politics was mainly a replica of the national politics. So, whatever is happening at the center, at the national politics, that was repeating in the state politics as well, because most of the states was ruled by Congress, like it was ruling the national politics. So, the central government was at a very dominant position at that point of time. State in those decades occupied a secondary place. So, what happened is the state governments introduced several measures under the directives of the centers like land reforms and community development programs. So, moving forward, we can see that there were many common patterns of politics in the state and the center. That means whatever is happening at the center was followed in the state. So, emergence of dissenting patterns simultaneously within the state politics. These developments challenge the dominant pattern of politics, the dominant position of Congress and secondary position of the state politics. So, within a few years of independence, India faced many issues. The first is the Naga and Mizo insurgencies that started in the northeast India. Secondly, the plebiscite front movement started in Jammu and Kashmir, which existed till August 5, 2019. Similarly, there was a demand of reorganization of states raised from the South India. So, parties with different ideological persuasions from that of Congress played significant role during this period in the politics of states. So, all the parties who were having a different ideology from Congress at that point of time, they were playing a very important role at that decade. So, moving forward, the socialist and the left, together in Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, Kerala, and West Bengal, Janasangha in North Indian states, the Akali Dal in Punjab mobilized people on different issues against the Congress. So these were the initial parties who were very strong at that point of time, who were mobilizing people against the Congress. So, following developments had set a tone for a pattern of state politics which was to emerge in India in the near future. So, it was Dalit movement led by the Republican Party of India in Maharashtra and UP, Dalit Panther in the Maharashtra, the cow protection movement of the Janasangh, that is also Janasangh, along with Janasangh, it was RSS, that is Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, and their affiliates in the North India. There were socialist movements for the spread of Hindi language and opposition to imposition of Hindi language in the south, or basically it is in the Tamil Nadu. Along with that, there was a demand for secession of Madras. Nowadays, it is known as Chennai. So, Congress hegemony was also challenged by parties like Swatantrata in Gujarat and Rajasthan. So, about this phase, Selig Harrison calls the decade of 1950s as the most dangerous decade. So the dominant pattern of state politics was challenged even from within the Congress. So there was challenge Congress was facing from the parties with different ideologies. But along with that, there was dominant pattern of state politics that was challenged even from within the Congress. So there were many members who were being the members of Congress. They were consolidating their base in their respective states. So, for example, Charan Singh carved out a base for himself within the intermediary and backward classes of UP while he was still in Congress. So, even being a part of a national party or Congress, there were many leaders who were solidifying their base in their own particular state. There was a faction fight between Charan Singh and other Congress leaders, resulted in the split of the Congress in Uttar Pradesh. This resulted into the emergence of a very powerful regional and rural force in the politics of the North Indian states. So, this faction fight between Charan Singh and the Congress leaders led to a very powerful regional and rural force, which was considered to be one of the major threat to the Congress's dominance at that point of time. So this pattern found its expression in the defeat of the Congress in several states in the general election in 1967. As we were discussing that after independence, there were many states who was dominated by the Congress party, as like national politics. Similarly, there were states who were following Congress, and the presence of Congress was very strong. But when we see general election of 1967, we found that Congress saw defeat in many states, and there was a formation of the coalition governments in the year 1969. So it set a new trend in the politics in the states of the Union of India. So now we talked about the decades of 1950s and 60s. Now we will be moving forward to the rise of regional forces and state politics in the decade of 1970s. So the reason behind the change in the pattern of state politics during this time period, that is the late 1960s and the entire 1970s, are following. So the first change was the demise of Jawaharlal Nehru in the year 1964. It was a major setback for India to lose the first prime minister who was ruling the country from so many years since independence. So this was a very big setback for India. Along with that, there was a decline of the Congress system. So the word Congress system or the phrase Congress system was first introduced by Rajni Kothari. Uh, he talked about Congress system because there was a dominance of Congress party in entire India. Another change that occurred in this period was the rise of Indira Gandhi, who personalized the Congress party and institutions of the governments. Along with that, there was a rise of rural rich people or the kulaks, especially in the areas which had witnessed the Green Revolution. So, in the 1960s, India witnessed the Green Revolution, the production of agricultural produces in a very large quantity. So, at that point of time, there were many farmers or there were very rural peoples who were becoming rich because of this Green Revolution. So they were also playing a very important role in the politics. So Charan Singh formed Bharatiya Kranti Dal and provided leadership and forum to a strong section in the state politics in North India for 2 decades. Similarly, in a large number of states, strong regional leaders with formidable social bases among the agrarian classes emerged on the lines of Uttar Pradesh. So we can see that in this decade there was a rise of people who were regional in nature, and they are solidifying their social base in many states of India. So these leaders and parties focused on the regional issues, demanding revamping the center state relations. Many leaders drew strength from the regional and state politics despite being graduated to the national politics and led regional political parties. So there were many leaders who were a part of the national political party, but they were drawing their strength from the region. Imposition of emergency in the year 1975 provided an opportunity to several state and national leaders and parties to come together against the dominant Congress. So this was a very dark period of Indian history where Indian politics, as such, because in this in this phase, in this decade, entire decade was marked by the emergency period. So, in during this emergency, it is believed that Congress was very dominating, and there were many parties, many people who came together in opposition to Congress party. So the Janata Party led governments both at the center and in the states introduced certain measures which had repercussions for the state politics. So there was also the appointment of the Mandal Commission, an introduction of the reservation for the backward classes in Bihar and Uttar Pradesh, which also set a new trend and that became very significant for the state and national politics. So, in this decade, or we can say in the late 1960s and early 1980s, there was an example of rising significance of the regional political forces as mentioned below. So, you can see that there were the conclaves of the opposition leaders. There was also the appointment of the Rajamannar Commission in Tamil Nadu. There was resolution of the left front in West Bengal, and appointment of Sarkaria Commission in 1983 played a very important role in this decade. So the leadership of the Congress and Indira Gandhi was challenged by Jayaprakash Narayan's movement, basically known as JP movement, and the Gujarat agitation in the 1970s. So this was the period when emergency was there, and there were many movements, growing in our country, which was challenging the Congress Party and Indira Gandhi. So unable to meet these challenges of the regional forces, JP movement and verdict of Allahabad High Court against Indira Gandhi, the center to imposed emergency in the country for 20 months. So there was a 20-month long emergency period in our country, starting from 1975 till 1977. So the post-emergency era saw the elevation of the regional leaders like Charan Singh in UP, Karpuri Thakur in Bihar, Devi Lal in Haryana, and others. So this post-emergency period saw a boost in the regional politics, which further impacted the national politics. So the state politics, now we will be talking about 1918 onwards, how the state politics was working and what shape it took. So to understand this decade or to understand this phase, we will be talking about other three different challenges that our India faced. So there was assertion of identities, which gave rise to regional forces. Similarly, impact of globalization also played a very important forces to uh, elevate the state politics in our country, and insurgency and state politics. And about all these three different reasons behind the rise of regional parties and state politics, we will be learning in our further slides. Starting with assertion of identities. So, the assertion of identities where you assert your space, your identity in front of others, which gives you a strength. So, the assertion of the Dalits and backward classes in North India contributed to the politics of similar assertion in the South India, which took place much earlier. So there was a politicization of the Dalits in the North India in the form of BSP, Bahujan Samaj Party. They politicized the Dalits basically in the northern parts of India. There was also backward classes in the form of various incarnation of Janta Dals in Bihar and Uttar Pradesh. There were non-party fronts related to various castes as well as the religion, further added new dimension to the state politics in India. So these were the identities which were coming forward and which was playing a very important role in asserting their identity. So whether it is caste or religion, they were coming forward in this era, which starts like we are talking about 1980s decade and then onwards. So in this period, there was assertion of identities. So this period also witnessed the rise of rich farmers in the form of Bharatiya Kisan Unions in UP and Punjab, Shetkari Sangathan in Maharashtra, Khedyut Samaj in Gujarat, and Karnataka Rajya Ryatha Sangh in Karnataka. So as we can see that there was assertion of identities, but there was a difference between the trends. For example, there was a difference in 1970 and 1980s. So there was a decades difference. So while the former, as the product of Green Revolution and the land reforms, mainly sought the share in the political power and favorable terms of trade for agricultural products. So basically, the 1970s decade, the farmers who were becoming rich, they were the result of the Green Revolution that took place in the 1960s. The later, like in the 80s, the focus was on the issue related to the market economy. So the growth of the rich farmers or the rich rural people in that period of time was varied because of the varied reasons. So in the 1970s, it was because of the Green Revolution, but in the 1980s, it was because of the market economy. So the new social forces raised multiple demands in different states, and these demands were reflected in the form of reservation, the creation of new states, greater allocation of resources from the center to the states. Now come forward to the impact of globalization, how globalization impacted the rise of the state politics and how it impacted for the regional forces to come forward and challenge the national politics or uh, come in the same level with the national politics and how they are playing an important role. So the state politics took a new turn towards the end of the last decade of the 20th century, that is the 90s decade, 1990s decade, when India witnessed the globalization, and it has weakened the position of the center on the one hand, and enable the states to be autonomous players in the national as well as state politics. So, as we all know that because of globalization, there was a very less control of state remained in our country, and in every country, the center become very weak. And in this condition, the states started playing an autonomous role uh, in their own side, like they are now more autonomous in their working methods. So the foreign direct investments did not have an even impact on all states. So there was an impact of globalization in Indian states, but the foreign direct investment did not have an even impact. So there were some states who benefited more, and there were some states who couldn't benefit from this globalization or the foreign direct investment. So, in fact, liberalization has resulted in competition among states to seek investment. So, what we can see that there is a competition between states to grab the offers of the liberalization or the foreign direct investments, and this created a huge disparity among the states. So, there are some states who become more advanced while the others remained backward. So, this was we can say a negative impact of globalization on our regional politics or our country, that there were many states who could benefit from globalization and foreign direct investments, whereas many states were there who lacked and who remained backward and couldn't gain from this globalization. So Lawrence Sayes's book, Federalism Without a Center, shows that globalization has enabled the states in India to act as independent entities to pursue their agendas. So before globalization, it was believed that states are dependent upon the centers, and they have to take permission to do anything uh, from the center if they wanted to pursue their agendas. But with the advent of globalization, now states started playing an independent role to pursue their agendas. So now they can negotiate directly with the international donors. So one of the very big impact of globalization was that now you don't need someone to convey your message. Now you can directly negotiate your deal with the international donors. Also, these states now can enter into agreement with different agencies. So, state can do this with the consent and approval of the central government. So, it is not like that state can do anything they want. They can do, but with the consent and approval from the central government. So, there is some kind of limitation that still exists when states directly contact the international donors or international agencies or any company. So this was not possible. All these things was not possible in the pre-globalization phase. But with globalization, these new things were changing in our country. So globalization has also resulted in the erosion of the intergovernmental institutions. So this is also a new change. And Lawrence Sayes argues that intergovernmental cooperation has given way to interjurisdictional competition as well. So, in this period of globalization, party system also changed. So, this globalization doesn't impact it only the economy, but it impacted the party system, and our party system, the political parties, witnessed many changes. So, in most of the states, two or more than two parties emerged as principal parties. So, what happened is in most of the states, two or more than two parties emerged as the principal parties, and state level parties are oriented towards specific region, religion, or caste. So, what happened? There were some issues which these parties were highlighting, these regional parties were highlighting in the state politics now onwards. So, these politics or these parties are able to exercise their influence through pre and post election alliances. So now the political parties have a power to identify or to come in an alliance fronts and partner in the coalition governments. So these are the new changes India was witnessing in the decade of 1980s and then onwards. So the role of political parties is generally focused on electoral mobilization. They mobilize the population on various issues, whether it is caste-based issues or religion issues or any issues related to the regional demands or regional aspirations. But the emergence of new social forces like the Dalits and the OBCs has also added to the non-electoral mobilization in the state. So now moving forward to the another reason or the of the changes in this decade is the insurgencies and state politics. How insurgencies played an important role. So the insurgency and related issues occupy a central place in the politics of several states, especially in northeast India, Punjab in the 1980s, and Jammu Kashmir. So, insurgency is one of the major challenges that India faced in this period, and many places it's still going on. But at that point of time, these issues were the burning issues. So, these insurgencies issues came from the northeastern part of our country. In the decade of 1980s, it also comes from Punjab, and since independence, Jammu Kashmir also witnessed this insurgencies which existed till 2019. So these developments not only impact politics of respective states but also have serious repercussions on national politics of the country. So whatever is happening in the state politics is ultimately impacting our national politics. So national politics is not like untouched from these happenings in the state. So now we can see that what are the reasons of the problems of insurgencies which India witnessed. One of the major reasons behind these insurgencies is the development issue. Secondly, inter-ethnic relations. And the third one is the autonomy and self-determination. So these three reasons are the problems, are reasons behind the problems of insurgency. And because of these three reasons, many states and many communities and many states are bringing forward these issues, and it is shaping the politics, not only the state politics but also the national politics. So while insurgency is directed against the nation states or its reference, in several instances it gave birth to ethnic riots and conflict among the ethnic groups. So India witnessed these ethnic riots since a very long time, and these insurgencies resulted many times into these ethnic riots and conflicts. And it is not new for India to witness all these insurgencies. India is facing such problems the time it got independence. So, insurgency movements questions the homogenizing nation building approach of the center in support of federation building approach. So, this nation building approach is criticized by these insurgency movements. So, in some cases, insurgency has been a byproduct of autonomy movement or the movement against the outsiders. So, this is also a very important issue that India faces from time to time. So, in this process, new groups demand autonomy or self determination. For example, there is a movement called United Liberation Front of Assam. In short form, it is known as ULFA. The other is Bodo Karbi movement, which were once a part of the All Assam Students Union agitation in Assam. So we finished with our first unit, and now we will be moving forward to unit 2, that is frameworks for analysis. So we will be learning why frameworks are needed for our study, to the study how to study the state politics. It is very important. So now we will see why and why we take this frameworks as an important thing to understand study of the state politics. So there are some ways or tools which suggest as to how we should study politics. So there should be some techniques, there should be some methods through which the state politics should be studied or researched or understood. So it is important for us to understand that which issues should be given priority. What are the issues which should be given priority and how to study the state politics. So these are the way through which we study the state politics or the way we study the politics instead are known as frameworks. So political scientists have used different frameworks in order to capture and understand patterns of state politics in India. So these are the perspectives through which one is studying a certain thing. So one must remember that there are no specific framework meant exclusively to state politics. So you should always remember that there are no specific framework specially designed for studying the state politics. There are many frameworks existed in our political arena, and through those frameworks we used to see or we used to study the politics of state as well. So the same frameworks can be applied to study politics at any level of its operation. So it is not like that we are applying this framework only to study the politics of state. We can apply it at local politics, we can apply it on national politics as well. So now in this unit, we will be learning about the frameworks, different frameworks through which we can see how to study. So the first framework which we'll be looking upon is systemic framework. Systemic framework is one of the most important frameworks to study the politics of state. Similarly, Marxian framework is very important. There is postmodernist framework, which we will be learning about. There is federation building framework and social capital frameworks. And most importantly, the frameworks to study elections. How to study election is also a very important thing to understand for a political science student. Starting with systemic framework. So, one of the most commonly used framework to analyze state politics is systemic framework. So, along with Marxian framework, this systemic framework is most commonly used and very popular among the authors, among the researchers, among the scholars to study state politics. This systemic framework is also known as structural functional, modernization, or development frameworks. So, if someone asks you about the structural functional framework, don't get confused because it is only the systemic framework. Similarly, if someone asks you about the what is modernization framework or what is developmental frameworks, so it is all about systemic framework. So it is also known by different names. So that means systemic frameworks is equal to structural functional framework, and it totally means modernization or development frameworks. So you have to keep that in mind. So this framework was there till 1970s and they were predominant. So systemic and Marxian framework were the predominant frameworks to study the state politics or national politics till 1970s. This systemic framework was a part of behavioral movement, and this framework was adopted by the political scientists to study changes and order in the political system. So, why this framework is used? This framework is used by the political scientists to study the changes. What are the changes and what are the order in the political system? So, where the systemic framework emerged? It was developed in the America. So, it is used to study politics of the countries which had been liberated from the colonial rule. So, after the end of the Second World War, many African, Asian, and Latin American countries got independence. And to understand or to study the politics in these newly liberated countries from a colonial rule was the main focus for this systemic framework. G.A. Armand and J.S. Coleman's edited book, The Politics of Developing Areas in 1960, popularized this framework. So after this book came in the market or came in the domain of political arena of the world, they developed this systemic framework and they popularized it. So do note the names of the authors of this important book, that is G.A. Ahmad and J.S. Coleman. The name or the title of the book is The Politics of Developing Areas in 1960. This is very important to know. Now, we will be talking about the basic features of systemic framework. Like what is systemic framework, how it works, why it is important. We will be learning about this in this slide of PPT. So, the unit of political activities is a political system. As we talked about the political system in our previous slide, that it talks about the changes and order in political system. Here we see what is political system either. The unit of political activity is a political system. The political system consists of political institutions, structures, and processes. So, political system is combined with the political institutions, structures, and processes. So, there are different constituent structures, institutions of the system which keep interacting, conflicting, and adjusting with each other. So, according to systemic framework, there are many institutions, many structures that together keep interacting. Many times it comes in the conflict and also adjusting with each other. So, they are balancing and counterbalancing themselves. So, this is the belief that these institutions do in a political system. So, these processes occur in a social and political milieu. In such a situation, the political system maintains itself. So, systemic framework says that in situation where they are adjusting, when they are interacting, so they maintain themselves and it does not break down. It is very important to understand that this political system doesn't break down and the political system thus is resilient. So, the most important example of its application to all India level politics is Rajni Kothari's book Politics in India. In previous slides, I told you that Rajni Kothari is the one who popularized the term Congress system, and he is the one who applied this systemic framework to all India level politics. So, please note down the book name, that is Politics in India, written by Rajni Kothari. So, the systemic framework came to be used by several individual scholars in case studies of individual states or the group of states. So, what is why and how the systemic framework is used by the politicians or the thinkers and scholars of political scientists is that this is used by several individual scholars in case studies of individual states or group of states. So this can be applied in both ways. So what they studied the various aspects of state politics, including political parties, factions within the parties, caste, religion, language, leadership, election pressure groups, and etc. So, what are the aspects that is being studied with this systemic framework? Is the political parties. So, how political parties is functioning, how the factions are creating within a political party, how caste, religion, language, leadership is affecting the politics of a state or a national party, or how election pressure groups are creating pressures and what how they are working is the things to be studied through this framework. Systemic framework has come under attack from various quarters. So, no framework, no perspective, or no theory can be perfect. So, there are many criticisms which emerged, and these criticisms pave the way to a new theory which can rectify the earlier one. So, this is a circular process, this is a cycle. How the theory emerges and then it is criticized on some points, and then a new theory emerges from that criticism. So, this systemic framework is highly criticized by the Marxist scholars. So, according to Marxist, now we will be seeing what are the points on which systemic framework is criticized by the Marxist scholars. The first is that systemic framework overlooks the role of class in politics. So, as Marxists believe that class plays a very crucial role in politics, and this systemic framework is not considering this role of class important. So, it is the first point that on which Marxists believe that systemic framework is lacking. Secondly, it undermines the significance of history in political process. So Marxist blames that systemic framework is undermining the significance of history in political process. Similarly, it subordinates the state to the political system. This is another point on which Marxist scholars are criticizing this framework. Along with that, Marxist blames that systemic framework doesn't link the politics within a country to the influence of outside forces like imperialism. So, what is they blaming? They are blaming that whatever is happening within a country is not linked with the outside world, outside phenomena. This is the thing which Marxists believe that systemic framework is lacking here. Another is that Marxists believe that systemic framework is basically anti-change and status quo. This framework doesn't change or doesn't bring any newness. So this is what Marxists are blaming. Now let's move forward to the Marxian framework. We finished the systemic framework. Now we are moving towards the Marxian framework, which is one of the most important, as I already told you, that Marxian framework and systemic framework are the two most important and the two most popular frameworks to study politics. So now we will be looking forward to the to understanding what Marxists are talking about the politics and how they want us to understand politics. So, according to this framework, according to this perceptions, analyzing politics in terms of class relations or social relations of production and forces of production. So, the main focus of Marxian framework is the class relation or the social relation of production and the forces of production. They consider politics as reflection of class relations. It is very important to understand that whatever there is a class relation existed in a society, it will severely impact the politics. So the politics is a reflection of this class relations. So politics is impacted or determined by the economic relation in a society. So whatever is the economic relation that is existing in a society will be impacting the politics or vice versa. So the class divided society serves the interest of the upper or the propertied class. Marxians believes that if there is a division of classes in a society, if there is a hierarchy of classes in a society, then the society will serve only the upper or the propertied classes. So there is a link of politics. As I already told you that in the systemic framework, they were blaming systemic framework for not linking the outside world and the happenings of a country inside. So Marxian framework links the politics in a developing country to the imperialism of the developed countries. So they are linking how the colonization process, imperialism process impacted the development of a country. This imperialism influences the politics, they believe, in the developing countries by the conditionalities of the international funding agencies like the World Bank and International Monetary Fund, famously known as IMF. So, because of these conditionalities, the states within the developing countries devise policies which adversely affect the ordinary people. So, Marxian framework blames that these conditionalities posed by the World Bank and the IMF, which is influenced by imperialism, as according to them, these conditionalities are severely impacting and adversely affecting the people, the ordinary people of a country. This is the thing that Marxian framework believes. So, unlike systemic framework, the Marxian framework traces the politics to its history. Very important that this Marxian framework traces the politics to its history, and which systemic framework was not focusing on that. So, they can also criticize systemic framework from this point of view. So there are differences among the Marxist scholars regarding the determining role of class or economic factors. And Marxian framework is not united. They have been divided into two groups. One is the classical Marxian framework, the other one is Marxism framework. So we will be talking about what is the difference between these two groups, or two groups within the Marxian framework. So, Marxian framework was divided into two groups, that is the classical Marxian framework and the neo Marxian framework. Let's talk about classical Marxian framework first. Classical Marxian framework is the approach mentioned in the Communist Manifesto. So, we can find this classical Marxian framework written in Communist Manifesto, and it is over determining role of economy in relation to politics. So, according to this classical Marxian framework, they over determine the role of economy in relation to politics, and the economy is base and the politics is superstructure. This is very important. You all can note it down that in Marxian framework, the economy is base, at is it is believed by the classical frameworks, and the politics is the superstructure on that base. So this classical Marxian framework, basically, this is applied to the study of agrarian movements, agrarian relations, and land reforms, and the trade union movement. So where it is used, this framework is used, or the prominent applications has been to the study of agrarian movements, agrarian relations, and the land reforms, and the trade union movements. So, this is all about classical Marxian framework. Now, we will be moving to the neo Marxian framework. So, the focus on non economic factors. So, where we can see that the classical Marxian framework is focusing on economy, and here, the neo Marxian framework is focusing on non economic factors, that is, culture, consciousness, to the analysis of politics. So, this is a stark difference between this classical Marxian and neo Marxian framework. This neo Marxian framework emerged as a result of the influence of Gramsci, Frankfurt School, and Ralph Miliband. So, as we can see that the classical Marxian approach is mentioned in the Communist Manifesto, whereas the neo-Marxian framework is the result of the influence of the Gramsci's writings, Frankfurt School, and Ralph Miliband's ideas. The Gramscian impact is most visible in the subaltern school. So, what is subaltern school? It is popularized by the Ranajit Guha, who's popularized the subaltern school. This subaltern framework argue that ordinary people develop their autonomous consciousness and take decisions accordingly without the impact of outside agencies. So, these are the differences between these two categories or two groups of Marxian frameworks. The first is classical Marxian framework, the other is neo-Marxian framework. Now moving forward to the postmodernist framework. So inspired, it is the postmodernist framework is inspired by the writings of the philosopher like Lyotard. Postmodernism has become a significant framework of analysis. So the application of the postmodern perspective is necessitated by the simultaneous rise of identities, social movements, and heightened social conflicts, or even ethnic and communal riots. So, this postmodern perspective becomes important when there is a rise of identities, when people are coming forward to assert their identities. There are social movements happening over the countries, and the conflicts, the social conflicts are heightened, and there are communal rights are going, ethnic rights are going. In this scenario, this framework is very important, and postmoderns look this identity and the rise of identity and social movements from a different point of view. So they are used by scholars belonging to different disciplines. So it is very important to note that we can't say that it is only applied by the political scientist scholars, but this framework is used by different disciplines. Moving forward, let's talk about the federation building framework. Federation building framework is another perspective through which we can study the politics of a state, nation, or even local politics. But to understand the state politics, it is very important framework. So this federation building framework developed against the modernization or development perspective. So this is criticizing the modernization process and the development perspective. So it is come as a criticism towards those frameworks. So the main aim or the study, it studies the problems related to the self-determination movements like autonomy movements, insurgencies, secessionist movements, and the conflicts arising because of them. As we can see, the word federation building framework, it talks about how a federation can work and how a federation can be built together. So it studies the problems related to these movements, insurgencies, autonomy, which is a danger to a federation. So they study these movements, secessionist movements, and try to understand why this is happening and what are the problems they are facing. So, the advocates of this framework argue that modernization framework to study the problems of federalism, self-determination movements is biased toward the formation of nation state. So, they are criticizing that modernization framework is a problem to the study of federalism, and self-determination movement is biased towards the formation of the nation state, and according to them, nation state is actually a construction. So this is what this framework talks about. Now let's talk about social capital framework. It is also one of the most important framework. Social capital has become quite popular concept to study the significance of associations in public life. So, in a public life, what is the role of association is what social capital is bothered about. So, it has become very popular because it studies the significance of association, how association works, how is association growing. This is what that social capital framework tries to look up. So, social capital is considered to be indicative of existence of civil society and democracy. As we all know that to for a civil for a democracy, it is very important thing to have a civil society, and this framework tries to see or tries to understand that what are the indicative of the existence of the civil societies and democracy. So, the rise of new social movements, civil societies, and realization to study substantive democracy has added to the significance of this perspective. So, this framework become popular or become important because it is studying or it is finding the significance of these new social movements that emerged in the later part of the 20th century in our country, and how civil societies is being developed over the time. So there is a political science scholar, Ashutosh Varshney. He is also an author. In his book Ethnic Conflict and Civic Life, Hindus and Muslims in India, has used this social capital framework to study ethnic riots in 6 cities of India. It is one of a very important book which tries to locate the problem of the ethnic conflict and civic life. And especially this book targets the Hindus and Muslims in India, like their focus or their case study revolves around the Hindus and Muslims in India and how it gave rise to ethnic conflict. And this book is based on the ethnic riots in 6 cities in India. So, in the decade of 1990s, we can say that there were many riots which took place, and that compelled many writers, many authors to work on this issue and finding out the reason why this is happening and what are the problems people are facing and what is occurring behind the scenes. Now, being the student of a political science, it is very important to know how to study elections, because election is one of the most significant feature of democracy, like a country India and even other countries. So elections are among the most significant features and at various levels of operation. So it is not like that it is only operational in national, but it is it exists in national level, state level, local level, panchayat level. So studying elections is very important. So this framework tries to study elections because it is very important to understand the state politics. So there are a host of people, survey agencies, psephologists who conduct surveys before and after elections to understand the public's opinion, understand the wave uh, before and after an election regarding the issues, the burning issues, and it catered to the immediate need to satisfy the public curiosity as well as provide data to analyze democracy in India. So elections are very important and it gives a kind of curiosity amongst the public, like who will win, who is coming to rule us, what are the issues which are being addressed by this party or that party. So this election study helps us to satisfy the public's curiosity, and also it provides data to understand, to analyze the democracy in India. So this is known as survey research. The election surveys done on the meticulously selected samples. So, to study election, survey research has been conducted, and these election surveys are done on a meticulously selected samples, collect data on the profiles of voters, constituencies, and relate the election results to assess the performance of parties members. So, what these election surveys do, they try to understand the mind of the voters, whom they are voting, why they are voting, why they are not voting the previous party, and why they are repeating their vote this time also. So this helps the study to find these things out. Also, it tries to find out which constituency is dominated by which group or which community, and how this is impacting the result of the election. Also, it helps us know how a political party is performing, and how the democracy is working, whether it is working properly or not, whether the democratic ideas are there in a election or not. So this helps us to understand. So, since survey research to study elections are time bound, so because you have to give results before elections, or you have to find out what is the outcome of this elections, because if you take a long time, then a new election will come forward and it will change the mind of the people. So it is very important to finish this election surveys in a time bound manner, because otherwise the voters will change their minds on certain issues. So these surveys are conducted before or after elections, and they do not tell us to what happens when elections do not take place. So this is what we have to understand. So with the help of correlation coefficient analysis, a relationship between the electoral performance or political parties with different social groups can be ascertained. So, this is the way through which elections are being studied, and these are the frameworks which help us understand how to study politics. So, if a person is new, he cannot be able to find out how to study politics, how to know what to study politics. So, these frameworks are giving us a way, giving us a targeted way, that if you take this framework you will be studying about this, if you take this framework you will be knowing about this, you will be focusing about this. Like the Marxian framework talks about the class relations, the systemic framework talks about the institutions, this framework to study election talks about how elections are conducting, how people are voting, and how things are going to change before and after an election. So these are the things which one should know and one should understand. So this is what all about our class. And with this, we are completing our block one, that is unit one and unit two, where we studied that what are the frameworks, why we study politics, why is state politics important, what are the stages of the state politics, which is coming from time to time. So in the next class, we will be talking about Block 2, and we will be talking about Unit 3, that is Union State Relations. In this part, we will be learning about legislative, economic, and administrative. And in Unit 4, we will be talking about the state and local relations. So, with this, thank you.